she wants to speak to us at some point. She is representing the county legislature as Shauna is not available. I don't see her on yet, but we will put her in after the reports of the subcommittees. So down at the end of the agenda. In the meantime, is there any other additions to the agenda? Yes, Rod.
I bet these would be really quick items. I want to talk about 5G and
Okay.
short-term rentals.
All right, we'll insert that in with your regular report on the Energy Subcommittee.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, Robert.
Yes, I would like to have a discussion sometime in the meeting regarding the county's decision not to have any special length terms so that redistricting would not take place in the county legislature until mid-decade.
Okay, that we would put as a further agenda, a further meeting agenda item. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get that, Kathy? If you would send that to a request to Kathy.
Yes.
And I see that Martha is on now. Martha, we would put you at the after the subcommittee reports.
Okay, I wanted to clarify. Hello, everybody. Shauna Black is not here. She asked me to sit in for and represent the county. So good to see everybody again.
Thank you.
Betty, I missed what you said about Bob's question. It is time sensitive. That issue is very time sensitive about the decision on legislature term, the next legislature term. Did you mean this was going to go to the next TCOG meeting or later in the meeting today?
Well, we can do it later in this meeting, but I'm not sure this is a TCOG issue. Isn't this something more to be taken up with the legislature?
Well, I thought, and I appreciate Bob bringing it up. I think it really is important as far as when legislators for election and whether that's on the same year cycle as town officials or on the cycle with the gubernatorial race. So it is relevant and it's time sensitive because of the deadline to get something on the ballot.
I'd like
Okay,
TCOG to be
we'll put it at
discussed
the end of the
today.
meeting then.
What?
All right, we'll add it at the end. Okay.
Great, thanks so much, appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Martha.
All right, in the meantime, is there any others? Okay, the next agenda
I'm
item.
sorry, Betty.
Yes?
Sorry, yeah, sorry, I joined a minute late, a couple minutes late. I don't know if you already talked about the reopening and public meetings and how people are handling going back to in-person meetings. Was that going to be on the agenda?
It hadn't been part of the agenda, no.
Okay.
I'd like to see it be part of the agenda because it would affect our August meeting perhaps.
Well, that's 2 months away, so I think we could worry about that later. But if we keep adding to this agenda, we're going to run over an hour and a half.
I'm patient.
All right, shall we go on to minutes approval of the February and April minutes? Entertain a motion. George? George is making the motion. Can I have a second to the motion? Joanne? Joanne has seconded the motion. Any discussion on the minutes from February and or April? If not, I will ask for a vote by show of hands, please. I see several people around here without faces, so I'm hoping Lauren, Gordon, Robert Fisher, and Linda. You're all muted, so I don't know what you're voting. Hi, Gordon. Okay.
This is Debbie Fisher from the Village of Dryden. I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm just abstaining.
Okay.
Betty, I was told I cannot vote, that Leslin is the actual alternate and I'm just sitting in, so I'm not voting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed? Joanne, you're muted. Unmute. All right. Yes,
There you
Joanne.
go. I was not at the April 23rd meeting.
Okay. So do you want to abstain from that one?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Motion is carried. And Jason this morning said he wasn't sure whether he would make it here today, and it appears that he is not here. So we will not have a county administrator report, but I think if anyone has been listening on Thursday mornings to his report, you would have all the information that you need anyway. I don't think it's necessary that we have him come in and repeat everything he said at 8:30 this morning. I'm hoping that everyone has been able to get in on those meetings because they are very informative. And he did report that he will be going to every other week. So next week he will not be making a report. He will be making a report in 2 weeks. Excuse me. Okay, our next item on the agenda is George. George, you're on. Unmute yourself, George.
Okay, so we're doing the water report now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody on the subcommittee. It's a really good subcommittee. And Liz is going to give us some on where we are now, because there's many different organizations involved in working on water quality throughout the Cayuga Lake watershed. So I'll let her lead off, and then I come in with some more information about Hydrilla and cleaning boats.
Okay, thanks, George. Hi, Liz.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody's faces. Hi, everybody. I hope you've all been well. Gosh, it really is nice to see all my old pals. Now I'm working, instead of being town supervisor, on water quality issues. And I thought one of the reasons was to spend time with grandchildren and 97-year-old mom. But I have to say, this water quality stuff is really interesting. And I'm putting in a lot of time, but it's a great group to work with. So starting last March, 2019 March, I joined the Water Resource Council and the Cayuga Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization, and just to become more familiar with some of the things that are going on around the watershed. And there's a lot of exciting work that's happening now. So as a result of bad things, sometimes like Hydrilla and HABs, sometimes that is a good motivator. So that silver lining. I have to say that in this water quality work, I have to give a lot of credit to the city of Ithaca. I mean, besides George working on this, we have Cynthia Brock, who is an alderperson and chair of the Water Resource Council and very heavily involved in the IO. Also Roxy Johnson, who is the lab, the watershed coordinator for the city of Ithaca and lab director there. And she's just been amazing. And also Tian Hunter from the town of Ithaca. So the city and the town have been super duper helpful and very, very active on this issue. So just as a reminder, in the watershed, there are 50 government entities, 1 city, 34 towns, 9 villages. It covers 6 counties. And actually, I think there's some discussion about the watershed. It may be 7 counties, but primarily 3, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tompkins. And Tompkins County accounts for 40% of the watershed area. So mobilized, if we're mobilized in Tompkins County, it can really make a big difference on the lake quality. So I did put together that summary of work that's a lot of pages long, just to show the breadth of the organizations that are working on water quality and each having a little special part. So that's the interesting thing, is that there is a lot of work going on from different organizations, but there are some definite gaps that are a hurdle for us. So, you know, in order to get the momentum going and get a more action in, we do need a dedicated person for that. So we have identified action items that need to be done that will help water quality. We have existing plans in place. One big one was from 2017. It's called the Watershed Restoration and Protection Plan. We also have from 2018, the state DEC's HABS action plan for just specifically for Cayuga Lake. And then the county has a bunch of plans that all reference water quality. So the conservation strategy, their comp plan, their hazard mitigation strategy, sustainability strategy, tourism. They have a special one, enhancing water resources, having to do with riparian areas and stream buffers. Anyway, there's a bunch there. And then we're waiting for a document that I think you might have heard of. It's called the TMDL, or the total maximum daily load of nutrients that can go into the lake. That's from the state. That will help us to know how much nutrient loading we're shooting for. But again, we've been waiting for 3 years on that. So that's an important thing to come out. But having all these plans is important because we need them as a basis and a foundation and justification for grants and such. So the IO, or this watershed, the municipal intermunicipal organization for the watershed, or IO that we call it, is also realizing that they need a staff person to move these priorities and actions along. It would be a person for the whole watershed. Other watersheds already have the equivalent of a watershed manager. Sometimes they're called that, sometimes they have a different title. So Owasco has one, Seneca Lake has one, Keuka Lake has one, and Canandaigua Lake has one. The only other large lake besides Cayuga is Skinny Atlas, and that falls under different authority because it's a drinking water source for Syracuse. So that's sort of different regulatory umbrella altogether. So we're really the only lake that doesn't have this kind of coordinator, and which is okay, I guess. It'll give us a path to follow. We've been using a lot of the other legal documents that other watersheds have already put together. We can use their job description and such. Just to outline what this person would do, and I know you've heard this before, they would implement plans, they would coordinate work between departments and agencies, they would apply for and administer funding. So that's a really big one, because other watersheds are bringing money into their watershed to help with these projects. So that person is leveraging their salary by bringing in sometimes like 3 times as much money as they're paid. So that's, you know, an efficient use of money. Well, I'll talk about another big project called Watershed Rules and Regulations later. There's education and training. And then for TCOG, one of the things that person would do is to provide model laws and model regulations. So zoning setbacks, conservation areas, drainage laws, wetland protections, unique natural area protections, and things like that. So that's what a person could help us with. The IO itself brings in very little money, only $19,000 or so a year, and has no staff, although the town of Ithaca has been very gracious, and they house, TN's working out of there, and they sort of hold the money for the IO. Some of that money from the IO goes into educational efforts like the floating classroom and the Cayuga Lake Watershed Network, which is Hillary Lambert's group that does some really great education and monitoring work. And then the IO also uses that money for grant matches. So that the dues for that were set back in 2004 at $900, and they haven't changed for 16 years. And so the IO is now working on a funding formula that would not be a straight $900 for every municipality. It would be based on the municipality's area in the watershed, their distance of, if they have lake shore, their taxable assessed value, and their population density. So at some point or other, when that's ready, there'll be a group that from the IO that is going to going to be bringing a presentation on the road about that funding formula and about what the IO does and about what the IO can do for you. So be expecting a letter soon. It's the dues are staying at $900 for 2021 because we know that there's no money anywhere. So it'll stay at its historic level. And in the meantime, we'll be looking for some temporary gap funding, maybe from the Park Foundation. We're also looking to contract some hours from the Finger Lakes Institute or Cayuga County Planning. The director there is Steve Lynch, and he's been very, very helpful and really enthusiastic about the watershed work that we're doing. So it could be that we actually have spoken with him, and he has some initial interest in having us contract with Cayuga County Planning for some of that work. So one of the things that we want to make sure doesn't get mixed up is there are some NGOs that are doing really great work, and we don't want to, certainly their funding is important. So I know some municipalities fund the Community Science Institute, and that work for monitoring is incredibly important. The same with the Watershed Network. Hillary Lambert's group does amazing education and outreach on hydrilla and invasive species and such. So those groups and others are important to keep funding going to. The IO has 2 grants going right now. One is, and you may have had an outreach from a woman named Kathy Bertucci asking you if you have shovel-ready projects. The IO is prioritizing those and will help to write grants to try and get those projects done. So I know she's also reaching out to soil and water conservation districts and such. So that's one of the projects or one of the grants. And the other is a grant to look at the organizational structure of the IO to assess our efficiency and inclusiveness and such. So those are 2 things we're juggling right now. As far as Tompkins County, they have a water resource council, and they have a number of subcommittees too. But for TCOG, you might be interested that they have a HAB subcommittee, and they are looking to prioritize what work municipalities can do first. They also have a monitoring subcommittee, and then one that's quite powerful potentially is this subcommittee that's working on what are called watershed rules and regulations. And you may have heard that Owasco Lake has these watershed rules and regulations drafted. The draft has gone to the state because the state needs to approve those. It's come back with comments from the State Department of Ag, and they've addressed those comments, and at some point soon they'll be resubmitting those to the state. Now, the importance of watershed rules and regulations is that they have regulatory teeth, which nothing else really does for the whole lake. They would require best management practices even for agriculture, which is a big deal because ag does contribute a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus to Cayuga Lake. Cornell has its own watershed on Fall Creek and up, and the city of Ithaca's watershed is different than Cayuga Lake as well. They each have watershed rules and regulations for their watershed area, but they're not from the 1930s. So they talk about outhouses and such. And Cayuga Lake has none. So there was some action in the 1990s to put watershed rules and regulations in place, but didn't go anywhere. So we're starting again, but it is a challenge because only a drinking water purveyor can put watershed rules and regulations into effect. So that is either Bolton Point, which of course has 6 municipalities. So that would be a long process to have it go through 6 municipalities. There's the Aurora, Village of Aurora's drinking water plant, but it is actually owned by Wells College. And then there's Seneca Falls drinking water. And they have not really been that engaged with this whole process. So, so we need one of those groups to sort of take this up in order for that to go into effect. And that is a long process. There's also a little bit of power struggle at the state level, as I understand it, with these watershed rules and regulations have to be submitted to the state health department, but the Department of Ag gets to comment on them. And the Department of Ag and the Department of Health are sort of arguing who should have priority, because the health department is saying some of the ag practices that allow nutrients to run into the lake are a health hazard. And the Department of Ag is saying, no, ag is exempt from this, and so you can't include us. So there is a discussion at the state level about this, which is interesting. Let's see, comes to TCOG. George McGonigal met with some of the IO members recently, and there is a lot to focus on. There's so many different directions and a lot of different plans. And I can provide those to you at TCOG. I guess that our question is, if TCOG wants to work on some of these actions, I'm happy to bring this request, any requests that come from TCOG, back to the IO or to the Water Resource Council to help. And a few of the actions that might be easiest and also effective to take, just some ideas here are adopting the 2012 wetlands map that is more accurate for Tompkins County, and then requiring setbacks to wetlands and streams. Stream buffers essentially is what they're talking about. We already have resolutions and local laws that are in place for that. So, it would just be a matter of inserting that into your zoning or a land use ordinance if you chose to do that. There's a lot of information about why buffers to streams and wetlands is really important, and we can provide that for you, helping to reduce flooding and sedimentation and nutrient runoff. There's advocating for these rules and regulations. That would be very helpful if TCOG were willing to have municipalities within TCOG join forces and have a resolution go to the state saying, we really need these rules and regulations to be in place. Please hurry it up. There are ditching best management practices. So there's a lot of different individual actions that municipalities can take. And I certainly am not going to this needs to be a conversation of what TCOG would like to do, and maybe different municipalities want to take up different things. So I'm just here to be the conduit back and forth between the IO or the Water Resource Council to see what things TCOG municipalities might find most helpful. And I know that George wants to talk more about Hydrilla and the boat cleaning that's going on with that.
Right, and someone signed on 279-4792. Could you tell me who this is? You need to unmute your phone.
It's Nancy Zahler from Ulysses. I was watching on YouTube. I'm listening now, but I'll need to jump off early, so I didn't want to be disruptive. Thank you.
It's okay. We're just checking to see who it is.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Nancy Zahler.
Thanks, Liz.
Okay, George.
I just want to thank Liz for the tremendous amount of information she's putting together. It's really complicated with all the different organizations, and she's really moving. And as she said, Roxy Johnston and Cynthia and Tian Hunter have all contributed a lot to this effort. The information I want to share actually came from Roxy and from Cynthia. Roxy let me know that hydrilla treatment in the lake, which I believe is sponsored by the state, is actually taking place today at several locations on the south end of Cayuga Lake and in Aurora. On the south end, it's near the Cornell University Sailing Center at Stewart Park. In the corner of the lake, on the southwest corner of the lake by the old marsh area, and in the inlet on. So obviously we still have a significant hydrilla problem, and hopefully this treatment today will have positive effects, because hydrilla is nasty stuff. I wanted to mention is that there are a couple pamphlets, one's available now and one will soon be available, that talk about boat cleaning, because one of the primary way that hydrilla is spread is when a body of water that's infected to another body of water carrying the hydrilla with them, and it can be so small you don't even see it. So there's important boat cleaning practices that all boaters should use. And what I want to ask the members of TCOG is, what would be a good place to distribute these pamphlets? I think if we all become involved in it, that would be very helpful. One that's available now, and I can send that around to you all, is from the Department of Environmental and the Water Resources Council. Cynthia's organization is developing one right now, and it will go to press very soon. We're hoping to get some contributions to help with that publication. And so that's going to help. So that's all I have. Do people have ideas about where these pamphlets could be distributed in their municipalities? I'm assuming at every boat launch on Cayuga Lake, at the least.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we've got 2 different marinas in Lansing, and I can help see that they get in there.
That would be great. Dryden Lake would be another idea. What other large bodies of water do we have? There's Little Pond and Dam.
What about the city with Stewart Park?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
There's,
Yeah, absolutely. And Cass, where, there's a number of canoe racks all
organic,
around the city now.
the state parks.
If I could join in, Hillary Lambert with her Cayuga Lake Watershed Network has done some of that distribution through her group. So I could, put you in contact with her to see what areas they're covering already, maybe with some of this information. So that one might be a good pairing.
Good idea.
I believe Town of Groton, where they get the fishing licenses, would also be a good place to put them too.
That's a great idea, because fishermen move from lake to lake a lot.
Very true.
I would think all the town clerk's offices should probably have them.
Dang, you guys are smarter than I am. I know that.
That's why we make a good team.
Yeah.
Could I say one other thing that this has been sort of it's one of those gaps that I don't exactly know how to fill, but there used to be public service announcements on television, and people don't really watch television ads anymore. And same with radio and such. So the whole avenue of public service announcements that would have been for something like this is kind of disappearing or disappeared on a lot of communication venues. So, that's been something that, it might be nice to have, I mean, maybe there is something, but I have been looking for it for a while. It might be nice to have some sort of county-wide public service announcement email service, and some examples of what the public service announcement would be. I know that in Ulysses, we have an email that goes out, or every couple of weeks. And it's been especially helpful during COVID, because probably, out of 5,000 people in Ulysses, there are 1,000 people on that list. So you can notify a lot of people about things. So we've forwarded information from the health department and information about COVID and, services and such. So I don't know if I don't know if there is such a thing across the county, but it would be helpful.
Also, Cuga Broadcast Group, which is all of the radio stations, does do public service announcements. I think if you contact their general office, that you could probably get public service announcements done through them.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how much of an audience you get to listen to that.
People listen to the radio in their car all the time, so I would think that it might hit a few people, as the guys are going to their fishing places, they might hear it.
What's the name of the radio group again? Is it
Cuga Radio Group.
Cuga Radio?
It's up on Hanshaw Road.
Yep.
Betty?
Yes.
Hi, Martha. I just, since the county's name was invoked, I think that, I think you can send lots of messages out there on the wind and they just drift over people's heads. I would imagine we could probably put out a press release. It's up to Jason to see what time Dominic Recchio has available for it. But so that's an option. We do not have a sort of general email list of the residents of the county. And I would, just listening to this, I would suspect that the targeted messages, where you get fishing licenses, the marinas, et cetera, that's really where you're going to get your bang for the buck on people's attention. So I would, I think that we certainly can, you can certainly approach Jason and find out if a press release would fit in with everything, all the other messages that we have to send out. But I think the target approach is probably going to be more productive.
Yeah, I think our town clerk office is where you get your fishing license is probably one of our best bets.
Is there a pamphlet or something like that available so it can be distributed either at the marinas or at the town clerk's offices? You're going to want to have something solid to present to people.
Good pamphlet, but they could use some help in the publication costs. So maybe we should decide if we can help them with that.
If you send a PDF to each of the town clerk's office, they could probably print it off and post it in their offices.
I have a question, sort of a suggestion. There's a number of places that sell worms. They have signs, "We sell worms." I don't know if worm fishers are fishing in streams or if they're doing in the lake, but if they're in the lake, getting distribution where they would step in to buy some worms, they would see the pamphlet. That's my thought.
Good idea.
Maybe they don't use worms in lakes. I don't know.
You do, but you do use worms in lakes. I know, because I did this weekend. So.
And you can spread hydrilla to a creek as well as a lake. So I think that's a great idea.
Does the
George, this is Ronnie Hardaway. I was thinking that maybe we could could we distribute some at local sporting goods stores or boat supply companies around the county as people go in and buy boats or buy supplies for their boats or equipment. I know some of that's associated with the marina, but there might be some retailers that could use the pamphlet too.
Yep.
I think if you get the pamphlet print ready, we can pass the word to whoever, and they can, if we can get an email, we can send the stuff to them and they can print them off too.
That sounds good. I've got another idea. I don't know if it this might be not much bang, but the Elmira TV station is really making an effort to include Ithaca and Tompkins County in their news coverage. And I've been on the phone with them on a couple other issues recently, and they seem to be very eager to broadcast things about Tompkins County. So maybe this is something that they could have on their morning news show or evening news show. Because obviously they deal with more than just Lake and Cuca Lake and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, if the next time you speak with them, ask them about it, George.
I will do that. Yep.
Okay, very good. Anything else on water quality? All right, should we move on to Rod Howe? Rod? Energy Subcommittee.
Sure. I'll start with those two non-energy committee issues first. Did you say to do it now?
Okay.
5G. This has become a pretty big deal in the city of Ithaca, and I know the town of Ithaca has had a very preliminary discussion with Verizon about 5G. There's been a lot of misinformation about 5G. So the city and the town are coming together to host a community forum on 5G, hopefully as balanced as we can make it, research-based. It's going to be July 21st. Well, you'll see information about it. July 21st at 4:30. I think the question was whether TCOG wanted to be listed. I don't know how many other communities, municipalities are thinking about 5G, know that they might be approached by a telecommunications company. So we just wanted to see if another municipality or TCOG wanted to be listed as a sponsor or of that. Donna, is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so. The Common Council for the City of Ithaca has gotten hundreds of emails for people demanding that we rescind our plan to enter into negotiations with Verizon. So we thought it was important to learn more about it, and so that we can give informed responses and proceed in a manner that is science, it's reason-based, and can allow us to have a fruitful dialogue.
Yes, Linda.
We just had a meeting this morning with a representative from Verizon talking about putting 4G and 5G on poles in our right-of-way. So I think they are moving aggressively. I've heard some of these emails, and I think I would be very happy to participate in a fact-finding type of meeting so that we can get the science straight.
Hey, Rad, you got a cohort.
So if anyone else wants, so Linda, we can list Cuga Heights as also a host sponsor, whatever. If anyone else, so maybe we don't have to do TCOG as an entity, but if any other municipality wants to be listed, let me know. We're pretty sure that we're going to be accused of not doing a research-based sound, but this is really to educate municipal officials and their staff, but we are opening it up to the broader community. It will be through Zoom, YouTube. We'll have a moderator, and we just started lining up panelists, including someone from NICOM and Association of Towns, and a Cornell professor who teaches a 5G class. So anyway, so let me know, email me if you want to be, if your municipality wants to be listed.
Oh, Rod.
Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Betty. Rod, do you think it would be appropriate for TCOG to sponsor this? I mean, you feel like it has broad application over the county. Okay.
Joe Whitmore, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that my understanding is Verizon's going to get rid of 3G altogether by 2022.
Will it cost us anything to be a co-sponsor, Rod?
No. I see Donna has her hand up, Betty.
Well, what is the feeling?
Betty,
Could we
Donna
entertain
has
a
a
motion? Mark?
Donna has a question, I believe.
Yes, Donna.
I would encourage TCOG to sponsor, and I don't think there'll be any expense. Because I said we got hundreds of messages. Well, a lot of those were not from city residents. I could probably forward them to any one of you representing your constituents. So I think it's really important that people from throughout the county become informed about this, because it's not, because people from throughout the county have opinions about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Jason, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, sponsoring it is not a big deal. It's just I think that technology generation, there's nothing necessarily special about it.
Okay.
They're different wavelengths. They're not I mean, really, it's just the phones aren't being built for 3G anymore. That's part of it. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean the frequency spectrum is not being used.
Right.
So, I mean, we had people complaining about 4G when it was coming in, and they're sitting in the back of my board meeting on their cell phone doing it. So it's like, 5G. I went to a presentation back in January. Its biggest selling point for the companies is that it carries more data because the wavelengths are shorter. It doesn't mean that the transmission rates or any, the energy is much different. So I don't know. I mean, I suppose if you're gonna have it as an informational thing, you're gonna need to find somebody who, if you just bring in people from industry and then you have the RFK Jr. types there, you're just going to have people screaming at each other. So it's a lot better to have somebody who's in the middle, like not beholden to either side, to just explain what it is.
Okay.
That's my only say on it, because you're going to hear them both going back and forth. I mean, industry says everything's peachy, and the Robert Kennedy guys say that it's going to trigger COVID. I mean, I'm not holding back on that one. So anyway.
Okay. George, unmute.
One thing I want to learn about, and I don't really have a dog in this fight yet, but the fact that they need an antenna, they say every 200 feet, seems very different than what we have now.
Yeah, it's because it's lower energy. It doesn't transmit as far. That's why.
And Betty, I didn't mean for this to turn into.
Can I finish my sentence?
I think we need to just hold this off for the possible discussion that Rad wants to have as a sponsor. So I'd like at this time to entertain a motion to be a sponsor for this. Can I get a motion from someone?
I'll make the motion, Betty.
Okay, Mark. A second to the motion. George has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Can you specify this? What are we co-sponsoring exactly?
This is a meeting about 5G.
Informational.
It will be an educational community forum about 5G, as balanced as we possibly can. It's meant to help municipal officials with more education so they can make informed decisions, but it will be open to the broader community as well.
Thank you.
I move that Rod's language be included in the resolution.
We can certainly have that done.
It's a good idea.
Any further discussion? Show of hands, all those in favor. All those opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Rod, would you get with Kathy to do the exact wording, please?
Sure, sure. And hopefully this other non-energy issue is quick. So some of us are coming together to talk about short-term rentals and how we might collaborate on the monitoring. Cuba Heights, the town, the city, and the county have been coming together. We thought, Linda, I'm looking at Linda, I think that we said this would be a good forum to see if other municipalities want to be included as we have discussions for coming together and sharing information and maybe collectively entering contracts with agencies that help monitor this. So Linda, I think that was the key issue, right?
Yes, it will be less expensive for everybody if everybody who needs this kind of service comes in together and does it. And it's not something that any of us can really do by ourselves. It requires software and computer skills that are well worth the money that we would have to pay for.
So again, it wasn't meant to get into a discussion about short-term rentals, but at least to find out if there's other municipalities that are expecting to be pretty involved in short-term rentals and want to be part of the discussion.
The town of Lansing is looking at short-term rental legislation, and I'm sure we'd be interested in at least being a part of the discussion.
Okay. Anyone else at this point? We were thinking maybe the village too. Don, has the village had discussions about this?
Our planning board is looking at it, but it's not at the front of their plate right now.
Usually,
Don? Village of Lansing?
I can follow up with Don.
Okay.
If anyone else changes their mind, let me know. This is going to be a slow discussion, I think, for a while because there's other things a priority. But now turning to just kind of a quick update on the Energy Subcommittee. We have 14 members. You can see the members listed on the TCOG website, and we've started listing resources. So I think each committee has its own webpage under TCOG. So we're trying to be good about posting resources there, but you'll see the 14 members. It's a pretty big committee. We're trying to hold it now at 14. As some of you probably were around when so community choice aggregation is our key focus. Some of you were probably part of previous discussions about CCA, which I guess was very active 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. So many of the folks who were involved then are wanting to tune in, and in fact, some of them are now on the Energy Subcommittee team. Then we have the slightly larger group that will be marketing webinars and opportunities to and getting their feedback. But we're trying to keep the Energy Committee to be sort of a strategic, tactical committee, and then find ways to get input from a broader group. So I think we're still sort of figuring that out, but I think we're getting closer there. Some of you may have participated in the webinar we did late May. It's recorded, so if you missed that, I don't think we have a link to that up on the Energy Committee page, so I'll make sure that that's there. It was just called Community Choice Aggregation, Path to Energy Independence. So Terry Carroll from Cornell Cooperative Extension and Irene Weiser were the two main presenters. So now we're moving forward. The whole point right now is to educate municipal officials on this topic. We're hoping in the fall to send out a survey to municipal officials to start getting a sense as to whether there'd be some municipalities who are interested in joining forces and being part of a CCA. But we want to make sure that there's enough of a common ground of understanding before we get to that. And you'll see all of these marketed. We'll certainly market these through TCOG, so you don't have to write down dates or anything. I'll just give you a flow of the next 3 months. On July 8th, there will be a webinar that will include representatives from Joule and Mega who work with CCA for their administrators to talk about the process, what have been the challenges. They're going to be back to back. So Jewel and Mega won't be on at the same time. They'll each have 45 minutes. Then we're setting up an opportunity July 14th to debrief from that webinar. On July 23rd, there will be a webinar of New York State municipal officials involved with CCAs for them to talk about their experience and for us to ask questions. And we're going to have the debriefing right after that event on July 23rd. So it will be a slightly longer meeting. In August 25th, we're intending on using that meeting. The Energy Subcommittee meets every month. August 25th to talk about the differences between 2.0 and 3.0. For those of you who watched the first webinar, you'll know what I'm talking about, but there's a level of intensity and how much you try to really incentivize more green energy in your communities. So it will be an interesting discussion to see if municipalities are involved, at what level of intensity are they willing to be involved. And then in September, we hope to do a webinar with Local Power, which is an organization that's definitely at the 3.0. They talk a lot about municipalities providing their own green energy and whatnot. So that's all to say that there's a series of opportunities to come up for municipal officials to be more fully informed. We'll keep posting things to the Energy Committee webpage. And at some point, probably, maybe this fall in this group, we would ask to help us identify some survey questions that you would want to see go into a survey of municipal officials. We'll probably seed that so it's not starting from scratch. I would envision at some fall meeting, we'd say, here's the kinds of questions we're anticipating asking. What do you think? What would you add? What would you change? There's some members of the committee on the call right now, so I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that brief update.
Great, Ron. We appreciate you send out your agendas and your reports so that we all have them. That's really great. We appreciate that very much. It's a lot of work. Mark?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Our emergency response and planning subcommittee has been meeting to discuss the challenges of providing rural emergency services. Right now, the committee is Gordon Hart, Irene Weiser, Dan Lamb, and Jessica Verafus, and Justin Van have also joined us. Beth McGee was previously on the committee and she's stepped down, but she's still willing to advise or provide input. Our minutes have been posted on our page on the county website, and so we've come up with three goals that we are recommending that TCOG pursue. So one of them is to encourage the legislature to lobby New York State for funding to support local emergency response. And the details will be in how and what qualifies for state funding. Rorden brought this idea forward and has proposed a CHIPS model, something like that, where municipalities would be eligible for state funds to support local emergency services. So that's one item. The next one is modernizing fire contracts at the town level. And so many of these contracts are antiquated, and there are legal repercussions for both the fire companies and the towns. There's Brad Pinsky is a lawyer who's knowledgeable in this area and presents at the Association of Towns meetings on this issue. And so he may be someone that we can reach out to for training of TCOG municipalities who want to modernize their fire contracts. So that's a very tangible, concrete one. Enfield has done this recently with very positive results. And then the final one is developing and facilitating EMS training. This one's a little more open-ended, looking for ways to help agencies already doing training expand their training services more broadly is one idea. And can we remove obstacles? Right now, in order to get state funds to offset the costs of training, you need to be a member of a volunteer fire or ambulance company. And so if we can find ways to provide training without the need to be a volunteer, so that people train in advance of becoming a volunteer, that might be helpful. And so then we had a discussion about, I think an outcome of one of the recommendations of the previous emergency task force was that the county would play a strong role in developing training opportunities. And so that's also in the discussion. So that's an overview of where we are. And I guess I would ask if others on the committee have anything to add to that. So.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure.
Robert.
Yes, good evening, good afternoon. We have not had a meeting of the Transportation Subcommittee. And that's one of the reasons I would like to get back to in-person meetings, because I really would like to sit down with members of the Transportation Subcommittee face-to-face and talk about what should be our priorities. And there's been so much going on with COVID right now that you really can't nail anything down in terms of long-term priorities. But I think we ought to look toward, among other things, having a better bus station in Ithaca. I think that's got to be a priority. If we're going to develop in this city, in this county, we've really got to have some kind of central transportation facility. And I think that's got to be a priority. And I'd like to sit down with the subcommittee members within the next month and try to work that out. And I hope we'd have an opportunity to meet face-to-face to do that, that the county would then open up legislative chambers for us to have a well-distanced discussion. I would like that.
I'm sure that could be arranged because we can meet in small groups now, being socially distanced, of course, but you can meet in small groups. So if you want to contact the county office and see about getting a meeting room, I'm sure they would help you out.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, now back to, how about Martha? Are you there, Martha?
Yes, I am. Thanks very much, Betty. Let's see, I guess there were two topics. One was the idea of the legislator terms. This is a little bit in the in the weeds, but let me explain. Our terms end at the end of 2022. So we are end of 2021. So the next legislature election is November 2021. The state changed the schedule for the primaries and for petitioning and moved all of that up so that people need to start petitioning and declaring their candidacy by February and March in 2021. Well, we will not have, as you know, the census is going on. There's no way we will have census data for the population of the county by then. So in 2021, we will have to run on districts, or the legislature will have to run on districts as they are. If the legislature, in 2010, we had an independent commission, one of only 2 counties in the state that had an independent group that actually met and looked at the demographics and redesigned the districts and proposed the configuration that we have now based on the new census data at that time. We have in our charter that we will do that again. But we need the new census data in time, to be able to do that. County were to pass a law, if we were to just go ahead without taking any new action, the legislators would be elected in 2021, take office in 2022, and stay in office until 2026 based on the census data from 2010. Many feel that that's way too long to be out of whack with the population. So what can we do about that? We would have to pass a local law and then have it be put up for referendum this fall, this November, to go to shorter terms, say a 1-year term or a 2-year term, or even a 3-year term. So we have been discussing this, debating it. And as some of you know, at the last legislature meeting, it was proposed that we ask the county attorney, we had a resolution, ask the county attorney to develop a local law going to a 2-year term and then 4-year terms. So that we would be elected, legislators would be elected and serve from 2022 to 2023. And that would give us time to redraw the districts. That measure failed, 7-7 tie. So that means, as it stands right now, we do have time. If one legislator decides to change their vote, if one of the no votes were to change their vote, we could bring that back for reconsideration. How this relates to towns, and specifically the city as well, is if we went to a 2-year term, we would stay in sync with town elections. Legislators would run at the same time that supervisors run, and half of your town boards, or how many of your town officials. So if we went to the 1-year term, which was proposed by Mike Lane, then that would put the legislature in sync with the gubernatorial elections. I'm just saying that, but that didn't get much support at all. But the idea of going to a 2-year term did get 7 votes. The issue for the city has to do with the city votes according to districts as well as geographic districts in your wards. And we've had the last 10 years having 5 wards in the city, but 4 county districts. It makes for right, George? It makes for very confusing district lines. There's the opportunity, if we were to do this in concert with the city, to sync those lines up again, because it actually appears that there's been growth in particular in the town of Lansing and in the city of Ithaca. So the city might actually qualify for a 5th legislator based on the population. The town of Lansing lines might move some, but in particular, we think that there would be a justification for a 5th city legislator. So raising this, I'm glad Bob was paying attention to this as well, and had some comments to the legislature on this, Bob Lynch, because if you think this is an issue, if you think that the legislature should go ahead and stay with a 4-year term until 2026 and stay out of sync, then you don't have to do anything. If you think that that's maybe not the best idea, if you think we should redistrict sooner than that, then I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your county legislator and ask for them to reconsider, or ask, or thank them for their support of going to a 2-year term. And The people who voted to stay with the 4-year terms were Mike Sigler, Glenn Morey, Dave McKenna, Amanda Champion, Shauna Black, Henry Granison, and Ann Corman. So it's a little bit harder to explain than just goes on a bumper sticker. So I'm a few minutes to explain this. I would be happy to answer any questions. Mike Lane is really feeling extremely upset about this and will propose weighted voting. If we end up with staying with a 4-year term, he's going to propose weighted voting because it will be clear that some legislators, if we stay with the same districts, some legislators will be representing many more individuals than others. And by right, they should have, more than a single unit vote. There are a lot of town boards of supervisors in New York State that still use weighted voting. We got rid of it back in the 70s. But he's not wrong that would be a more fair way to go than to stay with the 14 districts that we have until 2026.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yes, George.
Martha, has there been any discussion about possibly going back to 15 legislators instead of 14? So you don't have these 7-7 ties all the time?
Well, I wasn't going to raise that, but that would be a priority of mine. Absolutely. I think this is a really bad experiment. That would be up to the redistricting commission. When we did this in 2010, we asked individuals to apply. We had an interview process. Hank DeLay was the chair of it.
Right, I remember that.
And it was a nonpartisan or bipartisan commission, had a great process. And they came up with this particular configuration. It would be up to, the redistricting commission, and the legislature would end up having to vote it up or down. But basically, I think there'd be strong incentive to pass whatever the commission comes up with. So I certainly would encourage that they go to an odd number.
Martha, not to toot my own horn, but I think a member of TCOG right now did suggest to the redistricting commission back in 2010 that we keep it at 15 members, but I won't toot my horn any longer. I would like to see this TCOG, if its membership was interested, to go on record to at least say we would like the county legislature to reconsider its decision of last meeting and reconsider either to a 2+4 or 1+4 solution. I'll leave it up to them, but I think we can't wait until January 2026 to have a reapportioned legislature.
Thank you, Bob. I would agree that might have a good amount of influence, and the calendar is such that we have to reconsider it at our next legislature meeting, which is July 7th, or else there's not time to have a public hearing and then pass a local law, etc.
Anyone else want to join in? Joel?
Bob just raised the question of 1+4. Was that looked at at all?
Yeah, it was, and I think it could be done with the getting the census data, but it's a little sketchy. We don't know when the federal government is going to actually get these data to us. It wouldn't be impossible to do it, but I will tell you that only got 3 votes at the legislature. People don't want to really, the risk is that we set up a 1-year term, and then in fact, we would have to rush the redistricting process. And it feels 2 years is just a safer bet.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, a couple of us spoke up. Dan Klein and I both spoke up for keeping with the town elections anyway. We feel that if you go to the gubernatorial year, you end up sort of being lost in that bucket. And we really see a lot of advantages to running together with town officials as kind of a local office in those years.
Well, I move that TCOG support the reconsideration by the legislature of the proposal of going to a 2+4.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Joel that the TCOG go with the redistricting on the 2-4 plan. It was seconded by George. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Okay.
Any opposed? Joe Wetmore, are you voting? Joe, are you there? I think we've lost Joe Wetmore.
Bob was trying to say something.
The only thing I was saying was, I don't know whether we should tie the legislature's hands to a 2+4, or if they want to go to a 1+4. I don't want to slight Mike Lane in this because he has some good arguments, but I think what we want to do is we want to get redistricting done before 2025. That would be my suggestion.
Well, I don't think we have the power to go to any of the legislators and tell them this is the way it's going to be. This motion is just to say that we are in favor, to let them know that we are in favor of the 2-4 plan. Okay?
And is that a unanimous vote?
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem. The other issue?
Yeah, the other issue quickly was about in-person meetings, and you've heard Jason Molino talk about this on your municipal meetings, municipal calls, about July 7th being the date when the existing executive order expires. He's trying to get clarification about whether that means we are allowed to go to in-person or required to go to in-person. And maybe some of you have a better understanding from some calls I haven't been part of, but I think there's a big difference there, because we of course had a legal responsibility to be in person before that executive order. So I'm interested in knowing what, and I'm not talking about public hearings, I'm just talking about your own town board and city meetings. I'm interested in knowing how you're planning to deal with that, and what's your preference.
Rod?
Martha, I think I've heard several of town supervisors at least say there's probably going to be a hybrid period where some of us feel comfortable starting to meet in person, but for those board members who for a couple more months are uncomfortable, we'll continue to allow them to come in through Zoom. So I think we're going to do a hybrid.
Now in Groton, we did have an in-person village board meeting. It's Zoomed for any residents that wanted to attend. And that's what we probably will do next month.
I mean,
and Danby, the question is, we could meet in person, but how we would accommodate the public is a question that's not clear to me.
Yeah, that's why we Zoomed.
Yeah, but you know, the requirement of the law that was suspended by the governor also requires that there be in-person attendance by the public.
Right. We made it available to them, but we also allowed Zoom. We did a hybrid combination.
We hope to allow Zoom as a continuation because it's a good way to get people who otherwise couldn't come to the meeting to attend.
Excellent. Yes.
But how we allow for in-person attendance is not clear, given the limitations of the social distancing. You can't get very many people in the same building at all without running into difficulty.
Right.
So we'll need clarity on that.
And we start out with 14 legislators, and we add the staff who have to be there. We're up to 20, and that doesn't even bring any public in at all. And the city has a similar higher number than most town boards have.
Yeah. We're hoping the governor will, well, what we really needs to happen is for the legislature to make the opportunity of remote participation permanent rather than a temporary exception from the rules.
think under phase 4, we will be up to 50 people that we can accommodate. But of course, we've got to have a big enough room so that we
Right.
can have proper social distancing. And it was discussed this morning in conference call, and we may have to have everybody masked and everybody social distance. And there was even talk, I think, seriously, not just in conjecture, that a public hearing where you had a lot of people participating, you might have to have it outdoors.
Yeah, we had the same thought. Would it be appropriate? Would it be appropriate for TCOG to express a desire to both the governor and the state legislators that the matter be addressed and that the ability to meet remotely become a permanent feature of law?
I think we need to wait and see what his orders are and then act on it. Don, did you want to say something?
Yeah, in the conference call this morning, I think it's pretty clear that the governor is going to extend that, the remote meetings. And it's likely that it's going to be a permanent fixture, because one of the things that they've noticed is that there's been a much better turnout and people are actually engaged. And so from my point of view, it's a good thing. And I'd like to see it continue.
Granted.
I was actually asked by Leslie McBean Claiborne to see if I could poke some bears in Albany that I know that, to try to influence this. And if TCOG wanted to pass something sort of to encourage at least the extension of that executive order and consideration of permanent adjustment of the law, I'm sure that would be helpful. I mean, I think the downside of making it permanent is there is a public concern about transparency as far as, the whole reason we weren't allowed to have somebody vote remotely before was you don't know who's in the other side of the room, with a bribe or a gun or whatever. But that's the idea. So extending it during the period of the pandemic certainly is an easier request than making it permanent.
I'm a little concerned about going too long with the virtual meeting, as I feel it, we really need to have the lawmakers, the town board members, the county legislators in the same room interacting with each other. There is a dynamic that's established by having people all together. I have no problem with a meeting being distributed by video to the larger public, but I want to get us back into brick and mortar again.
Well, I would say that there's a different dynamic associated with Zoom meetings, and different isn't necessarily inferior. There's some advantages to it.
I agree with that, Joel. From my experience, I've had very positive experiences with board interactions with the Zoom meetings. So I'm certainly hoping that this is going to result in a permanent change to allow us to meet in this way. It has a lot of positive effects. I've used a lot less paper this way, and the amount of driving to meetings by everyone is just obviously that's a big reduction in transportation. So.
Anyone else?
I think there are pros and cons. I think a request to extend this option, I think, would really be helpful. And if after the pandemic, if we're all vaccinated, if we maintain Zoom as an option, that might be the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that under the open meetings law, meeting by Zoom was allowed. It's just that under that scenario, you had to allow the public to attend any location where board members were residing. So, but anyway, I would support such a resolution by TCOG that Martha suggested. So.
Yeah, I have no objection to extending it, but it's hard for us to remember, I think, that a significant number of people don't have computers.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, one of the disadvantages of all Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Although
have,
you can phone in. Most everybody has a phone.
yeah, but it's not the same if you can't see. And
This
I
is
think
true.
that we have a problem in Enfield, even with cell service, let alone broadband service.
Yeah. You know, landlines still work, believe it or not.
I do believe that. I have one.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm not supposed to vote, so I presume I'm not supposed to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that
Yeah, but
we,
Mark did, right?
And the motion will be what, Mark?
I guess the motion would be that TCOG support or advocate advocate for extension of the ability of local governments to meet remotely by teleconference.
I'll second that.
Who did the second?
Me, Joel.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Motion has been made by Mark and seconded by Joel to advocate for the extension of having municipal meetings virtual combination and live or in person, I guess would be the word.
I
All those in favor?
extend, I think the issue is to extend the executive order that's going to expire on July 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Although it need not be limited to the executive order. I mean, if the legislature wanted to act on it, that would be great. But
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want a meeting to go on forever, for years in the future, just virtual. I think that would be wrong. I think we've got to get back into it. If we want to have a hybrid or something, but just to say that the blank town board is going to meet online for the next 10, 20 years, I don't want that.
That's not what the motion says. The motion says a hybrid. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Bob Lynch, abstention? All the rest in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right.
Thanks very
Anything
much.
else, Martha?
No, that's great. Really appreciate being part of this and seeing everybody again. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Other points of discussion. We've got about 5 minutes.
Betty, I'll mention one thing from my the TCAT Transit Services Committee.
Yes.
So we did not meet, but Matt Yarrow sent out a report on the 10th of June. And I sent out, or they sent out, and then I sent that to Katrina and Michelle, and they sent it to all of you, I think, that TCAT has put out a ridership survey to evaluate the impact of the pandemic on ridership, so that they can get that kind of feedback for their planning. Ridership on TCAT has been reduced by about 95%. And so they are, this is a big deal for them. So I'll just put out an appeal to have people, encourage people to, your residents to complete that survey for TCAT.
Okay.
And then the one detail from the Transit Services Committee, you might remember that Dryden was they were going to do a T-Connect service, first mile, last mile service, which was going to be in collaboration with Gadabout. And that's been canceled due to the Route 43 schedule reduction. It kind of blew that up. So they're reconsidering that. That's a NYSERDA sponsored sort of experimental program to try to encourage rural ridership. So they're looking for alternatives, and they're considering Route 53, which services Ellis Hollow and Brooktondale. So
okay,
we'll
Thank
see.
you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Anyone want any suggestions for our next agenda? Our next meeting will be in August.
I think, Betty, the emergency, at our next emergency services and planning meeting, we're going to discuss the wording for the resolution that we'd like to propose to the Tompkins County Legislature.
Okay, so you'll want to be on the agenda.
So
Correct?
yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay, emergency planning and preparedness, definitely on the agenda. Anyone else have any thoughts for our next agenda? Well, you've got a couple of months to think about it. So if you have any thoughts, you can let Katrina know, or Mark or Joe or myself, any agenda items that you would like to see.
How about, since it's going to be August, corn on the cob from throughout the county?
Okay, sounds good. Where's the strawberries now?
Right, right.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Ronnie.
Is that you, Ron?
Yeah.
Ronnie?
It was. Yes, it
Okay,
was.
motion by Ronnie Hardaway to adjourn, second. George?
Yep.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
safe couple of months.
Well done, Betty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So
Thank
long,
you.
everyone.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Yeah.
Great seeing everybody. Take care.
Bye.